The day has come at last. Sony has finally brought Cyberpunk 2077 back to the PSN store, back on sale a whole 6 months on from it being removed on the 17th of December 2020 due to its overall quality on PlayStation 4 systems in particular, and really it speaks to just how rocky a start Cyberpunk had. Visual glitches, pop-in, frame rate issues, all these were just the tip of the iceberg for PS4 and PS4 Pro's delivery of the year's biggest game. The real tipping point? The reports of game-breaking bugs, and worse still, full crashes to the system front end. In terms of quality assurance then, Sony clearly saw this as a product not suitable for sale in December. And so here we are with the patch promising to save the day, patch 1.23. Does 1.23 solve the game's long-standing framerate issues on PS4 and PS4 Pro? What of the bugs, the pop-in? And how does PS5 benefit from running on a newly patched PS4 version? And most crucially, does it put an end to the crashes seen as recently as patch 1.20? Let's find out. The patch then, what's in it? CDPR's official notes are relatively light this time, at least compared to its previous updates. Still, by most game standards, 1.23 packs a decent punch. We get a string of bug fixes specific to each mission, though for testing today the focus really is on the stability and performance section here. Crash fixes, CPU optimizations on console, alongside improved streaming likely account for bringing Cyberpunk back to the PSN store. Meanwhile, Sony itself has tried to, let's say, manage expectations here. The official PlayStation Twitter account recommends playing only on a PS4 Pro or PS5 if you're lucky to have one. And it goes even further on the game's actual store page. The PSN store actively discourages even buying the game for use on base PS4, saying it is, and I quote, not recommended, with more updates due to arrive for it later this year. So, not recommended on base PS4, that's the official line. It doesn't exactly inspire confidence, does it? It's also a thing of rarity to see a platform holder discourage you from buying a game on such a widely owned system, but here we are. Now, the surprise. In truth, the base PS4 version is better now, despite Sony's lack of confidence in it. Booting the patch 1.23 game on PS4, PS4 Pro and PS5 today, I tested each in turn to give all a fair shake, to see if frame rates are improved compared to the previous update 1.20. I started a fresh new save on each console, playing past the taxing Maelstromers mission, and well, I'll say this right up front. I've had 0 crashes on patch 1.23 so far, which immediately counts as a win in my book. Hang-ups and crashes to the PS4's front end were an issue as recently as patch 1.20, but so far, so good. That's not to say they're 100% eliminated, I can't stress this enough. Your mileage may vary in a game of such magnitude, but it was always this shootout for me that would trigger the biggest lockups. So far, well, evidence does suggest CDPR has taken extra steps to at least minimize the game's freezes, which is good news. But what of the performance? Let's kick off with base PS4 to see the situation and if it really is still as dire as Sony makes it out to be. Let's get the positives out first. Base PS4's frame rate is boosted all round on patch 1.23, though it's still far from where it needs to be, especially in combat or busy streets. The margins may look slim, but let's take this first exit to the big city as an example. Here I run around the block in a matching route on patch 1.20 on left versus 1.23 on right. Now the entrance to the apartment block is tightly matched between them, but outside, we get a consistent boost up to 5 FPS on the newer patch, which is really unexpected. It's not always such a huge increase, but 1.23 is consistently ahead here. And so it goes for the even more taxing market area. Both patches are clearly operating under 30 FPS, but 1.23 does at least get a 3 to 4 FPS boost as we sprint between the stalls. Base PS4 is improved then, we see it on foot and behind the wheel too. Driving to Lizzie's bar, 1.23 locks more tightly to 30 FPS, which is just great to see. I honestly didn't expect to find any form of upgrade. And to prove it isn't a one-off, we even see the game's early shootout push a markedly smoother readout on balance as well. So it seems between patch 1.10, patch 1.20 and this latest update, CDPR is edging closer and closer to hitting 30 FPS. The patch notes mention memory and CPU optimizations, and it's really on show here, even if the margins are again slight at points. That's not to give PS4 an absolute pass as far as performance goes. It's obviously got a long way to go. My stress test down this alley, for example, going all guns blazing, still has patch 1.23 struggling to stay afloat of 20 FPS, though again you'll see PS4 does a very marginally better job of it fully updated. Okay, next, what of the bugs, the visual oddities? As far as PS4 goes, the fight to smooth off its rough edges rages on. At the very least, this opening shootout restores the lighting on patch 1.23, which was bizarrely missing on the last patch. But still, it's very much work in progress elsewhere. Hitching is still a regular occurrence, unfortunately. Sudden stutters kick in during play if you move too fast through Night City. Now, from what I can tell, these sudden frame rate drops are tied to the game's world streaming engine, a CPU bottleneck perhaps that coincides with textures, geometry and NPCs popping in. Base PS4 just frankly struggles to keep up. And there are some pretty extreme cases of it too. I mean, check this out. Road barricades appear just a few meters ahead, barely enough time for me to swerve out the way. And of course, NPCs can still render in their low poly state in busy areas. This, it seems, is still a reality with patch 1.23 on base PS4. Next up is PS4 Pro, the PS4 Professional. Now, it's worth stressing that generally speaking, PS4 Pro's frame rate was in a far more acceptable place on the last patch. Barring drops in the Maelstrom battles, the campaign flowed mostly at 30 FPS on patch 1.20, and so, the situation is only marginally improved on 1.23. Side by side showed all the usual test points are a matched 30 FPS on each patch. The city market run, the driving shootout, all still 30 FPS with occasional one-off missed frames. The only outlier is in emerging to the big city. Now here we see patch 1.23 has a big streaming hitch, just as we leave the apartment block. Nothing to read too much into in terms of the comparison itself, it's really just a coincidence. But again, it shows asset streaming remains a big problem on PS4 Pro, and yes, pop-in is still a bother on the enhanced console, with textures, NPCs, even enemies, as you can see here, popping in far too late. So the question remains, are frame rates improved on PS4 Pro even in the worst spots? The PlayStation tweet, after all, is confident in both PS4 Pro and PS5's delivery of Cyberpunk right now, and I'd argue it's far more justifiable on patch 1.23. Just so long as you're prepared for the streaming hitches and leftover visual bugs on Pro, then yes, I can gladly say it's more consistently playable at 30 FPS now. Now, there are exceptional points obviously. This alley stress test, for example, you can really push CDPR's engine to big sub 30 drops by unleashing all hell on the city streets. By and large though, patch 1.23 gives us a tangible boost. As you can see, it's an up to 5 to 6 FPS gain over the last patch. Again, with every new update, it seems to get closer to the mark. The game's obviously still rife with visual oddities, pop-in, and all sorts, and most glaring is the fact that the world streaming hitches are still a problem, but the baseline frame rate is only getting better. To round up then, I have a final look at PS5. As we've seen before, it's still the PS4 Pro codebase running in back-compat mode on PS5, albeit with an extra tweak to unlock it to 60 FPS. And in that sense, patch 1.23's impact isn't quite as substantial as the older machines. As far as I can see, the priority for patch 1.23 appears to be on improving the base machines. PS5, as it stands then, continues to run well at 60 FPS on the new patch though. Expect drops to 50 FPS in the alley shootout, or taking turns on busy streets. The Maelstromers battle also has its moments too, but this is very much cherry picking the worst spots. Other than that, PS5 so far runs surprisingly well, even with what's essentially a temporary fix to get it running at 60 FPS. For PS5 and Series X, the best is yet to come, of course. We're waiting on the true next-gen patch due later this year, where full use of the hardware should tighten performance, but we'll see. As far as patch 1.23 is concerned though, it's mostly a win on the last generation PlayStations. The base PS4 and PS4 Pro versions are better in frame rates, though sub 20 FPS gameplay still blights the base console. Most crucially, crashes are at least reduced based on my time with it. The real downside, as far as I can see right now, is the hitching and pop-in remain a big problem that still needs to be sorted. Patch 1.23 shows real progress then, but more work clearly needs to be done. So that's about all for today. If you did find this analysis of Cyberpunk on its latest patch useful or insightful in any way, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. And of course, as ever, you can get a high quality version of this video at our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. And to get in touch with myself or the rest of the team, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.